For those of you just joining, we'll get started in just a minute. In the meantime, while we are waiting for everyone to join, if you want to write in the chat where you are currently situated, your current location, that would be great. Aha. Bay Area, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Fabulous. Welcome, everyone. All right, then. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon to everyone. I'm so happy that you are here with us this afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you to our second Inside Academic session. The theme for today's session is Express Yourself, and we have a wonderful slate of speakers who will be speaking along these topics. So let me just introduce myself. I'm Peggy Burge. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Associate Director for Public Services at Collins Library. And today we have with us Nick Brody, who's a professor in communication studies, Lynette Claire, who's a professor in business and leadership, and Katie Curtis, who is a humanities librarian in Collins Library. So welcome to our three speakers. So we have just a few quick notes before we get started. First, throughout this session, please do not hesitate to type questions or comments related to the speakers, what they're speaking about. You can, if you have a comment or a reaction that you want to share with us all, you can put that in chat. There will be several points during the presentations where we will pause and see if we can attend to some or maybe even all of the questions or comments. Okay, so the second little piece of information, our third speaker will be Katie. And Katie has a little interesting interactive activity planned for us as part of her presentation. So what you will need is a piece of rectangular paper. It could be 8.5 by 11, but just a nice rectangle is something that you'll need for later on today. So with no further ado, I am going to turn things over to Professor Nick Brody.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Give me a second here, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, welcome everyone. So excited for you to join us here today. Like Peggy mentioned, my name is Professor Nick Brody. I use he, him pronouns. I am about to enter into somehow my 9th year here at the University of Puget Sound. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. Not sure if there are any fellow Texans out there, but welcome, or soon to be welcome, to the Pacific Northwest. To all of you, we're excited to have you here, and I'm excited to get to know many of you over the next year and several years. I'm a professor in communication studies, and it's likely that very few of you had a communication studies class or took communication studies classes when you were students in high school. So just real briefly to give you a background on that field, maybe you took a public speaking class or a speech class, and that is roughly communication studies, but we examine messages. So how people exchange messages, create messages, interpret messages in their relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, family relationships, online, in mediated context and via technology, which is what I'll be talking about today, in viewing film and television, and in cultural and political contexts. So in this discussion today, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about my research and how, the rapid adoption of technology for interacting, not just over the last year, although I think we've all experienced this acutely over the last year, but really over the last several decades, has changed the way that we interact, but it also in many ways reflects the way that we've interacted for all of human history. So this is intended to be, it's relatively short, but it's intended to be discussion based, in that I'm going to ask some general questions, and I do invite you to drop some of your comments and feedback into the chat, and I'll be checking that and responding to those as I'm able to over the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. If you do have questions, feel free to drop those in as we go as well. So when I was a kid, and I'm much older than all of you, this is what the internet meant. All right, so you're probably not really familiar with this, but essentially we had to use telephone lines to dial into the internet, and I was fascinated by the internet when I was a teenager, and this is really where my interest in this field came from. I was fascinated with this idea that there was so much information at our fingertips, that there were so many people just accessible to us from the comfort of our home. And I think a lot of times nowadays we take this for granted, but it really was just truly exciting to me when I was a teenager, when I was a little bit younger than you in middle school and in high school. And when I got to college and subsequently graduate school, when I started to think about what I wanted to research and what I wanted to teach when I was a professor, and I began to research topics related to technology and how it affects us in our relationships and in our social lives, I noticed that there was generally, especially in popular accounts, so in magazines and in the popular media, there was a lot of concern with the negative effects of technology on us and on our social lives. Here's a notable example from, this is actually at this point now from about 4 years ago. And I'm not sure if any of you saw this headline or have maybe had people in your life mention something like this to you, right? Smartphones are destroying your generation. In this case, it was actually talking about a generation before you, mostly millennials who are a little older than you. I noticed that this was a pretty common refrain. This was a common cultural concern. And here are some other examples that some of these I pulled just over the last week. Some of them are from several years ago. So maybe Tinder and dating apps are bringing about a dating apocalypse. Google is making us stupid. Instagram makes us miserable. Twitter, makes us continue to click and update and get news constantly. Facebook, Vine, and Snapchat lead to infidelity in relationships. Texting makes us bad spellers. We've all been on Zoom. Oh no, here we are on Zoom right now. What is this doing to our mental health and our body image, right? And there's probably a kernel of truth to many of these, but I don't know if any of you have seen some of these over the last few years, or if you can think of any other examples. If anyone can think of other examples of these types of, what we call moral panics. In other words, people saying that technology is going to exert some kind of negative force on us. If you want to drop those in the chat over the next minute or two, and I'll come to some of your examples as I continue to go through the talk. So if you can think of any other examples of this, the other one here that I didn't mention was video games cause real world violence. If you play Grand Theft Auto, if you play other violent video games, Red Dead Redemption, that's gonna lead to real world violence as well. And I'm sure some of you have some other examples that you can think of as well. So at the gut level, these types of concerns make sense because we can think of personal experiences from our own life where that has been true. There have been times over the last year where I've been on Zoom a lot and my mental health has suffered. There have been times over the last year where I'm on Instagram and I'm miserable, right? Emma here has an example of social media tends to, social comparison, especially comparing ourselves to upward, maybe in regards to our physical attractiveness or our social attractiveness. Tyler has an example here just about how there's just so many of these claims in modern society. We see them all the time, right? It's overwhelming. And we can think of personal examples in our own life that match up with some of these headlines. So they can be appealing for us. My concern, which was also as I began to research these topics and as I began to conduct my own research related to communication and technology, was of course informed by other theorists in the field, is that these approaches take what we call an overly deterministic perspective. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that technology exerts an influence on us as individuals. It exerts an effect on us in our relationships and leaves us as completely powerless victims, right? In other words, these approaches, the headlines that we saw on the previous slide, these headlines essentially shortchange our individual ability to use technology in some way to solve problems or to fulfill our interpersonal goals as we see fit. You know, we're all a little bit burned out on technology use after the last year, but think about how much more difficult this past year and a half might have been without technology for connecting with each other or for continuing our education, just as one quick example. And this type of deterministic thinking as it relates to technology has a really long history. We tend to see the dystopian dark side of technology before we see the optimistic positive side of technology use. And to give you one really, really old example, Socrates, all right, Socrates bemoaned the development of the written word. Socrates was worried that the development of the written word, which in Socrates' time was a new technology, being able to write down thoughts onto tablets was a new technology back then. And he was really worried about it. He was really worried about it because he thought that it would lead to forgetfulness. He thought his students would just put all of his lectures onto these tablets, write down all of their thoughts on these tablets, and they wouldn't have to think critically about these ideas, about these philosophical ideas. Scholars in the 15th century worried that the printing press would lead to laziness and degrade the quality of books, okay? We thought the same thing about the early internet all those years ago when I was signing on to AOL, America Online via my dial-up modem. So this is a common thing that occurs as technology, new technology is introduced and we integrate it into our lives. So in my research and in this talk today, I tend to, rather than focusing on how technology affects us, I like to focus a little bit more on how, when, and why we can use technology to achieve interpersonal goals. And it really is this complex interplay between context and our own needs and our own goals. Studying technology is complex and complicated because human beings are complex and complicated. And I would say after this last year and a half, if this last year and a half has taught us anything, it's that humans are complicated, right? People are complicated and they're hard to predict. Their behavior is hard to predict and understand. So what I want to do over the next 6 minutes or so is introduce you to a series of what I call dialectical tensions that remove this idea of technology is either good or bad and give us some new frameworks to think about our own technology use, especially as you enter into a new exciting stage of your life, as you come to college and over the next 4 years. I call these challenges to studying communication technology, and these are challenges, but they're also opportunities for reflecting on our own technologies. And the first tension is a tension of publicness versus privacy. These things used to be easily distinguishable. Public communication occurred in public spaces. Private communication occurred in private spaces. You would rarely have a personal conversation available to the broad public. But now, because we're on the move, it happens quite often, right? One message can be screenshotted and sent to millions of people. I'm sure many of us have been out somewhere in public and heard somebody having a very personal conversation on the telephone, and just for those of you with your camera on, or if you want to, note other examples of when you've maybe heard people having private conversations in public. And at the same time, especially this last year and a half, our private spaces have become public spaces. And in many cases, public spaces have become private spaces. So I'm here at my house, in my home office. You get to see my weird cow art on the wall, right? This is my private space, but it is now also a public space that I share with not just my students, but also public audiences. So in thinking about our use of technology to communicate with each other, we often think about these public versus private tensions. So when you're using technology to communicate, it can be sometimes helpful to think about what element of this message is private, what element of this message is potentially public. Another tension that I encourage my students to think about is one of absence versus presence. So in other words, where are you when you are using technology? In many ways, we can be entirely alone, right? We can be quarantined in our residence hall dorm room, but feel like we're in the presence of dozens, hundreds, thousands of other people. Technology allows us to do that, be in the presence of others, even when we're in the absence of others. Or we can be in a physical place, but feel miles away because of our use of technology. I wonder how many of you have ever been, sitting around a table with friends in the presence of your close friends, but everyone feels like maybe they're on their phone in this entirely separate place. Many of us have experienced that, and I know talking to my students, they often experience that as well. Some of you may be entering college in long-distance romantic relationships. Many of you will be entering college and starting to maintain long-distance friendships, and this can become especially notable in those types of relationships because we might know how to interact in the physical presence of someone, but we have to adjust our interaction now via technology to communicating similar things like affection and love, but in their physical absence. So managing this tension via technology can be something that's really, important to consider and reflect on, especially as you come to college. And the last one I want to briefly discuss is this idea of real versus virtual. A lot of times we think of technology as being, whatever happens online isn't real. And I don't know how many of you have seen the MTV show Catfish, right? This is the extreme version of that. On Catfish, whoever these people were communicating with online, they might be entirely fabricated individuals. They're not real. And this gets at this deeper question of whether or not what we're doing online is reflective of our real selves. Are the interactions that we're having online reflective of our real selves? My approach to research says, yes, this is an aspect of who we are, because in practice, none of us have a single solitary identity. We're all managing multiple versions of ourselves. We all present multiple versions of ourselves depending on the context and depending on the place. You're going to grapple with this as you come to college and meet new people. What element of myself am I going to present to these people? To what extent do people having access to my old Instagram posts or to my TikTok account hinder or help my ability to present this identity to new people? Our online identities are real, but they're also virtual in that we can curate them and carefully craft them and present specific elements of them. So this tension is another one I encourage you to consider over the coming months as you come to college and think about how your online identity might fit in with your offline identity as you come to Puget Sound. And I'm going to stop there so we have plenty of time for questions and discussion. But again, I think these are just some ideas that you can latch onto and think about with your own technology use as you enter into this new exciting phase of your life. And like I said before, I look forward to meeting many of you on campus in the coming months and certainly years. And I encourage you to reach out to me. My email's there, my Twitter's there, follow at your own risk with any questions about my research, classes, comm studies, or technology in general. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Brody. That was really wonderful. Do you have any questions for Professor Brody that we can attend to right now? If you do, go ahead and you can either put a Q or a C in chat if you want to speak, or you can type something. No? All right. Well, you know how to contact Professor Brody. Oh, Emma. Go ahead.
Should I unmute or no?
Yeah, go ahead. We'd love to meet our new students.
Hi, I thought that was so interesting. It makes me want to take a communications class now really a lot now. But have you ever watched, this is a question, have you ever watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix? I did. It's very interesting.
I've seen parts of The Social Dilemma. I have some issues with it, although I do think it raises some really interesting conversation points and discussion points, and it does come up, especially in my intro class quite a bit, and we kind of deconstruct some of the arguments that they make. But if you email me, I'm happy to share some of my favorite articles discussing the social dilemma. So I encourage you, Emma, to reach out to me and I'll send
No,
along some of
I
those
will.
articles.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question.
Great. Anybody else? Thank you, Emma. Okay, so I am going to turn things over now to Professor Lynette Claire of our Business and Leadership program.
All right, have to remember to unmute. So thank you so much. And thanks, Professor Brody. Interesting stuff. So I'm Professor Claire, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm actually from the Bay Area, like many of you, although I have lived my life since I finished undergraduate in the Pacific Northwest. Perhaps most importantly for you, I am all things entrepreneurial. That is sort of my identity here on campus and probably off campus too. What I'm going to share with you today comes from one of my classes. It's an entrepreneurial mindset for the arts. I teach it every other year. It's Business 380. You don't need to be a business major to take it. And what we focus on in that class is how to think like an entrepreneur. The students then practice this with their community arts partners as they develop a feasibility study to help the arts partner expand or change their audience. So we're going to start today with a quick introduction to the entrepreneurial mindset, and then I'm going to do an exercise with you that I do in my classroom. And finally, I'm going to share a few ways that having an entrepreneurial mindset can help you on campus and in life. So what is an entrepreneurial mindset? Well, really, it's just how entrepreneurs think. What's interesting about one thing that's interesting about an entrepreneurial mindset is that it works both ways, that our learning how to think like an entrepreneur helps you be more entrepreneurial. And being more entrepreneurial helps you develop a stronger entrepreneurship mindset. And so it's kind of a two-way thing. We've seen that from research, so it's pretty interesting. So what does it mean to think like an entrepreneur? Well, this is a list of some of the aspects, we could call them, of an entrepreneurial mindset. I'm going to go through each one and explain them a little bit. And I'm just going to give you fair warning that I'm going to ask each of you to choose one aspect to practice today in a little exercise we'll do, and this week. And so you'll be committing to that in chat. So just so you know. Okay, so let's go get started. An action orientation is about taking action, and proactiveness is really that sense of being active rather than reactive to the world. Innovativeness, especially what we call discontinuous innovation, is important. So innovation can happen what we call incrementally, or it can be this kind of radical change like AOL was that Professor Brody talked about. Resilience to adversity is really about bouncing back from something that happens, and optimism is more about a positive outlook. And we do know that you can learn optimism. So if you don't feel like you're very optimistic, there's hope for you. Persistence at a goal-directed behavior. Sometimes we think about this as grit, right? Just getting there, just keep doing it. Domain-specific self-efficacy. So two parts of that. Domain-specific means subject-specific, and self-efficacy is a belief in yourself that you can do it. So you might have domain-specific self-efficacy. So that might be that you believe that you could start an online business, or it may be that you believe that you could start a baked goods shop, whatever it is, right? So that domain-specific. Role identity is really about seeing yourself as an entrepreneur, and it's very closely tied to your mental prototypes, which is really, what do you think an entrepreneur is? If you think they're all 40-something males who are white, then if you don't identify as that, that's going to be really challenging for you, right? So developing mental prototypes that will help you see yourself as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurial intensity relates to both the degree and amount of entrepreneurship. So how much are you doing? And then how intense is it, right? So tolerance for ambiguity is sort of how good are you with things that are generally unclear? Whereas tolerance for uncertainty is slightly different, which is about how good are you with not having enough information, right? Embracing risk is about willingness to take chances. The future orientation is really about delaying gratification and thinking about everything in the long term, right? So thinking about that long term, what's going to happen, and then the delaying gratification might be, how long are you okay with waiting to get a reward or feedback from the marketplace or something like that? We call things entrepreneurial behaviors because it's not all about launching a venture. It's also about engaging in activities that are going to lead you in that direction perhaps one day. So I just got off a Zoom call with an advisee who has a great idea for this website, and I encouraged him to develop a wireframe, which then we had to talk about how you do that and what does that mean, which we can have that discussion another day. Entrepreneurial intentions are it's about your attitudes and the social norms that influence our willingness to be entrepreneurial. Value creation is about actually creating value through your entrepreneurial behaviors as opposed to simply taking advantage of a glitch in the system, so opportunism. And market orientation means thinking about the market or who are you serving? What do they want and what are they doing? Okay, so that's a big overview to an entrepreneurial mindset. If you have questions, you can put those in chat, a Q, or just type out the question. But if you're trying to think, oh, I want to think more like an entrepreneur and I'm going to do it all, that's really not a great place to start. You're going to get quickly overwhelmed. And so what I would like you to do is to commit to one that you would like to work on to practice in our exercise today and for this week. So choose one, put it in chat. The nice thing about you doing this is that you can choose multiple ones, whereas in class we have to they fight for which one they want to do. So we have one person for each one. So great. Okay, I think a few more people still need to enter it in chat, but I'm going to trust you that you're going to do that. I don't know. Maybe so. Okay. So when we're working on developing our entrepreneurial mindset in class, which is something we do the entire semester, and we work with this, we talk about aspects of the entrepreneurial mindset as being something we take on as our superpower for a few weeks. And it's really worked well, this conceptualization. And so we think of ourselves as superheroes, that we're going to champion the one aspect of the entrepreneurial mindset that we committed to. And so that would be what you've just done. You committed to an aspect of it. And so people share how they're implementing that, experimenting with it, championing it in outside of class and in all kinds of places. We also do several activities with it. And so, as you know, one of them is what we're going to do now. And so, as you know, superheroes have layers, right? They have caves and things like that where they're these secret places, right, where they keep their technology or their symbols of power. Maybe they're things that help enhance their power or that protect them from danger or enable them to be better at their power. And so we might talk about these as artifacts, right? Things that we have. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a minute and take a deep breath. Okay. And we're going to take a trip, each of us individually, to our lair. Okay. So I want you to start heading from where you're sitting right now to your lair, however that movement might occur. And what does the landscape look like, or what's around you? And what's the temperature and how is it changing as you head toward your lair? Is there some sort of smell or sounds associated with this? And up ahead, I want you to see the entrance to your lair. I want you to look at that entrance and see what it looks like, and maybe touch that, whatever you need to touch to go in. I want you to go enter into your lair. And I want you to look around. What's in your lair? Is there a lot of stuff? What draws your attention? What does it feel like in here? And as you're looking around, seeing the many different things that are in your lair, I want you to choose one that you're going to bring back with you to the outside world. I'll give you another minute or two to look around and find some artifact that you could bring back from your lair. When you find that artifact that you want to bring back, I want you to take really good hold of it in your mind so you'll have it with you as you exit your lair. Feel how things change when you exit your lair and come back on your journey back to us being together in virtual space here and to the world that we know where you use your superpower. And when you're ready, I'd like you to open your eyes and just put in chat what your artifact is and what your superpower is. If you have other things you'd like to tell us about your trip, that's great too. I do want you to enter what you brought back. Some people bring back big things. Some people bring back small things. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so keep entering it. I just have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we wind this up. I take a little longer than this in class to do it. We talk a lot about what people brought back because it's so interesting. And I want you to encourage you to think about how this artifact can help you on campus, in life, right? How can it help you, right? These are really fun. It's fun to read these. So mm, feedback from students about thinking like an entrepreneur tells me that it's a very powerful exercise to learn to do, and that my students take this with them into all aspects of their life, which is pretty exciting. And so I thought I'd give you a few examples of how people have used their entrepreneurial mindset. And one way is that they used it with a fall event we have called Innovate Create, where students come together at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. And by 3 p.m., they're presenting solutions to an entrepreneurial dilemma. This was Ben Mingus' coconut water husk problem, and it was a big problem. It's a huge pile of coconut husks behind him. And so it's pretty fun. They definitely use their entrepreneurial mindset with their community partners. That's kind of the purpose in the class. And this is Maggie talking at the symposium about how the Children's Museum can develop a promotional marketing box of goodies to engage underrepresented families at partner sites. There's Martina talking about how at the Botanical Garden, they want to engage youth and that on-site theater productions might be a great way to do that out in the gardens. This is Issei talking about the Tacoma Refugee Choir. They wanted to expand their reach while also maintaining their current audience and support. And so they created this awesome social media campaign that Tacoma Refugee Choir actually implemented during the course of the class to help publicize and optimize the release of their Census 2020 song that they wrote and recorded. It's pretty cool, and it's all very Tacoma if you're interested in that. So I know they've had a 3x in Instagram followers since that team worked with them. Lucy said she was completely inspired by this to really publicize her junior recital. And Lucy ended up having the only in-person junior recital of spring of 2020, because we all know what happened in spring of 2020. So those are just some examples. I encourage you to think about how you can create a reminder for yourself of this aspect of the entrepreneurial mindset that you committed to. In class, we make superhero costumes, which is super fun, and to embody sort of one of our superpowers. So we really enjoy that day. That's always super fun. That's at the maker space, which is in the basement of the library. And I guess finally, just find up, what can you do to remind yourself to develop and use an entrepreneurial mindset? So that's my question to you. And with that, I will end.
Thank you so much, Professor Claire. So do any of you have any questions for Professor Claire? If you want to ask, just put a C or a Q in the comments, or you can type out a question. Give you just a few moments to think. I'm still deciding on what my superpower will be.
You just choose one to start with, and then you go from there. So I'm on the first floor of McIntyre Hall. When you get into campus, that's right by the fountain. And if you're interested in anything entrepreneurial, just wander into the first floor and you'll find me. Ask, who's that entrepreneurial professor? And they'll be like, oh, that's Lynette. Go see her. So, okay.
All right. Well, thank you again, Professor Claire. So now we will turn to our humanities librarian, Katie Curtis.
Hello. All right. Let me figure out how to share my slides really quickly. Hopefully everybody's seeing what I'm seeing now. Hello, everyone. As Peggy said, my name is Katie Curtis. My personal pronouns are she, her, and I'm a humanities librarian at Collins Library. This is my 6th year at Puget Sound. I'm originally from Central Florida, so I don't know if we have anybody on the call that's from that far away, but I made it clear across the country here to the Pacific Northwest. I'm really excited to be here with all of you on Zoom. I'm even more excited to welcome you to campus in 3D this fall. Like, you have no idea. As a librarian, I work closely with several different departments on campus. Some of those include English, gender and queer studies, philosophy, and a few other ones. But I also curate our Collins Library zine collection, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So when you make it to campus, you'll find that we have a lot more stuff in the library, really unique and interesting materials aside from, books and journal articles. And zines are some of my very, very favorite materials that we have in the library. I'm really excited to share them with you. So in this little mini session, I'm going to introduce you to zines as a medium for self-expression, and then hopefully, if we have time, give you an opportunity to start creating your very own mini zine. But before we get started, I'm really curious to know, and actually maybe y'all can respond to this in the chat. Has anyone ever heard of a zine before? Do you know what they are? If you have heard of them, what do you know? How would you describe them? And we'll see if we can get Peggy to read out a couple of those responses. Emma has published a local zine. I couldn't wait. Sorry, Peggy. That's so exciting to me. Emma, I can't wait to hear about your zine. Anyone else?
Oh no, I got published in a local zine. I did not make my own.
That is a good start. You got to start somewhere. That's so exciting. Anyone else? Well, Anya's had friends who have written and published zines. Wonderful. So we have some folks that are maybe familiar, maybe haven't done a lot of creating themselves, but might be kind of interested or excited about maybe getting a little bit creative. So we're going to talk a little bit about zines and what they're like, and then try our hand at creating some. Zines can be really difficult to define because they vary so widely in size, content, style, and the ways that they're produced. But at their core, zines are self-published booklets that anyone can make about anything for any reason. I know that doesn't really tell you much about them, but that's the simplest that I can make it. Most zines are created on paper and include a mixture of text and graphics. These could be handwritten or drawn, like the image of the zine that you see on this slide. They could be like a cut and paste collage style or something a little bit fancier. As a medium of expression, they are incredibly versatile. With zines, you can incorporate all sorts of different skills, from writing to art to graphic design to publishing and even research. And so that's one thing that I really, really love about this format. Content-wise, they're generally informative. And so you'll find zines that might celebrate either a niche interest, a hobby, something that you're excited about. Many zines foreground some kind of personal narrative and might read more like a diary or a journal. And sometimes they aren't very personal at all. They might be arguing for a particular political or kind of societal position. So there's lots of different ways that folks are using this format to do really interesting things. So we have a collection at Collins Library of zines, which we started in July of 2016. We have over 300 zines. It's incredible. They are my favorite things that are both historical and contemporary. Like I said, they come in all shapes and sizes, all different styles and different types of content. Our zines cover a really wide range of topics. I just listed a few of them on this slide. So from personal narratives to politics, intersectional identities, activism, social justice, mini comics. We have zines on DIY gardening, if that's your thing. We have recipe zines, poetry and art zines, zines about feminism, and much, 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 much more. And we also collect zines that are created by our Puget Sound students. So some of the images that you're seeing on this slide on the far left are some of our newer additions to our zine collection. We've got a few zines that are documenting folks' experiences over the past year with the COVID-19 pandemic. In the center is one of my personal favorite zines. It's an issue of Doris, which is a very long-running feminist zine that the author Cindy Crabb has been creating since the 90s, I think like 1993. So a really, really long-running zine. And then on the far right, the image that you're seeing is are a few of our student created zines. So we love seeing zines from our students. These are just a few examples of what students have been doing. So you can see at the top left of that image a zine called Anonymous Voices. It's by the Advocates for Detainees Voices student organization. They collected narratives from folks inside the Northwest Detention Center and compiled them into a zine. Below that, We Own Our Words is a zine that was just created this past year from students in the Freedom Education Project Puget Sound program, or FEPS, which is a college program for incarcerated women, trans-identified and gender nonconforming folks in Washington State. We have zines that students have created around social justice issues. The one in the middle is a zine from KUPS, our university radio station. So students are doing a lot of stuff that is very well represented in our collection that we're really, really, really happy about. So you may encounter zines in a few different ways once you arrive on campus. Whether that's in class or through a special event or a workshop. Because these are really unique primary sources that offer these like kind of really engaging, tactile, like sometimes they're funny, sometimes serious, but usually very intimate perspectives on a really wide range of topics. We use them in classes a lot, all across disciplines at the university. So I've used them with English students to talk about Indigenous literature, so the way that Native folks write about their own lives. I've used them in a rhetorics of resistance class with the English department, in gender and queer studies, in the seminars in scholarly inquiry, and more. So hopefully you will get a chance to experience this wonderful collection when you arrive. A few times throughout the year, every once in a while, we also host reading hours in the archives where you can pop up to the second floor of Collins Library and join us and just spend some time flipping through stuff and looking at some of these documents. And we also host workshops, usually once or twice a semester in the makerspace, where you can come in and get started making your own stuff. Of course, you are always welcome to visit our collection, whether it's for fun, whether it's for research, or you can make your own zines at any time, which I think is a really fun and worthwhile activity. It's a great thing to do. The question that I have on this slide is why make a zine? And I think the most basic answer that I can give is because we all have stories to tell. And zines allow you to share your experiences with whatever audience you want to on your own terms, right? You control the entire creative process for your zine. And so you can experiment with different artistic styles. You can choose the format that it takes, the ways that you want your reader to engage with it. You can focus it on an issue or a topic that you know a lot about that you think other people should learn about as well. Or they're a really great way to build community. You can trade them with friends. You can organize around a specific issue that you're invested in and create something collaborative, like the Advocates for Detainees Voices did. They came together and kind of put something together to communicate about an issue that they're really passionate and involved with. So I think you can use zines for a lot of stuff. They're super fun and actually really easy to make. So we have a few minutes. I thought, whoops, I skipped a slide. My goodness. I thought it would be fun for us to make something together. We can do it, I swear, in less than probably 3 minutes. And so I'm going to walk us through how to fold and cut out a 1-page mini zine from a single sheet of paper. Mini zines are really easy projects if you're just getting started with zine making because they require very, very few supplies and whatever crafting materials you have on hand. So you can see a list of supplies on the slide. All you really need is paper, something to write with, scissors. Even if you don't have scissors, you can tear your paper. Doesn't matter, doesn't have to be perfect. And when I say crafting supplies, whatever you have on hand, I literally mean whatever you have on hand. If you are not a crafty person, I am not a crafty person, or if you don't have a lot of, art supplies or things at your disposal, one thing I love about zines is that they can be unpolished. They can even be a little bit messy. The point is just to get creative and have fun. So if you don't have paint, if you don't have markers, let me tell you, if you don't have paper, food packaging, dried flowers, what else? What else did I write down? Junk mail, makeup, nail polish, all of those work fine, whatever you have at your disposal. So there's a fun image and instructions on this slide and some resources with some links that I could share later. I'm actually just gonna take the slides off so y'all can see me fold up this zine because I think that's a little bit easier to follow. So if you have your sheet of paper, all you have to do is fold it in half 3 times. So starting from my full sheet of paper, I folded it in half once. I'm going to fold it in half again, one more time, till I'm down to about 1/8 of the size of my original sheet of paper. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it helps if you make some good creases along those folds, because that's going to end up helping us create pages that we can flip through, right? So this is the size of our final mini zine, but as you can see right now, it's a pretty crappy zine. There's only 2 pages, right? I can't fold these other pages. It's not very good. So we need to create some pages. So if you've got a sheet of paper, if you're following along and you made it to this stage, all you have to do is unfold that paper 2 times. Back to this size. So it should be half, 1 piece of paper folded in half. You've got your 4 sections on each side. To make pages for this zine, we just need to make one cut in this paper. The way that I'm holding this, you've got the open edge over here, and then this is the side with the crease on it. So when you're making a cut in your paper, you're going to cut from this creased edge right here across this middle line just to that center mark. That's it. So you'll end up with something that looks a little bit like a Pac-Man mouse. That is perfect. If I were to unfold this paper, you could see I've got a big hole in the middle of it now. So now I can actually fold this up and create my mini booklet. So if you're still following along, if you've made it to this stage, we're going to take this sheet of paper, we're going to fold it in half again, but this time we're going to fold it lengthwise, or what I like to call hot dog style. So the long way, right? And so you can see I've got that kind of hole right in the center where I cut my paper. Lynette, you're following. I love it. So if you've made it to this stage, you can kind of see I'm holding my paper sideways now so I can see that hole, and I'm pinching the outer edges with my fingers kind of on the end. Now to create our mini booklet, what we're going to do is we're going to take these folded up edges, and then we're going to push them into the center. So you can kind of see my pages folding into each other right here. Yeah. So you're just going to push them into the center, flatten that out. Like I said, crinkle your paper. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then when I fold it in half again, ta-da, now I've got a mini booklet that I can flip through. So that, congratulations, if you made it through that really brief tutorial, you just made a little mini zine. So let me get my slides back up here because I have one more. Unfortunately, let's see, let me get back here. So unfortunately today, we don't have time to fill out the content of our pages, but my selfish wish is that you will actually make one of these little booklets, that you will fill it out with something, and that you will share it with us online, or you'll share it with us when you get to campus. Content-wise, this theme can be literally whatever you want. I have suggestions on this slide for what you could possibly do with a format like this. You could introduce yourself to a roommate or a classmate, document your college experience, document your hopes and dreams for your college experience, write about something that interests you. You can play around with the form. This is your zine, so you can totally go for it. It doesn't have to be text-based. You could draw pictures, doodle, make a collage, write a poem, or some other kind of form of expression. I find that just playing around with the form of what I'm trying to communicate can actually get me thinking about my ideas in really creative ways, and maybe in ways that I hadn't thought of before I started playing around with, trying to make blackout poetry out of something. Like I said, I'm not very creative. But finally, don't worry about making mistakes. Your zine doesn't have to be perfect. None of us are perfect. They aren't supposed to be perfect. So there's no pressure in this. There's no right or wrong way to do it. You can fill it out with whatever you would like. We're really excited to welcome you to campus this fall, and I hope we'll be able to make some zines when you arrive. I think your university experience is exciting, it's intimidating, it's very transformational, and I think if you attended our first session, my colleague Adriana emphasized in that session that it's worth thinking about how you're going to build community on campus and how you're going to document your time here. And so whether that's through a zine or social media or through another kind of format, I really encourage you to think about how you want to capture this time in your lives, because it's really something that you're going to want to take with you moving forward. If you're interested in learning more about zines, you can look up any of the resources online. You can find the archives on Instagram. We post photos of our zines and also all sorts of things that we have in the library that might be interesting to you. And with that, I will turn it back over to Peggy.
Thank you so much, Katie Curtis. So what questions do you have for Katie? While you're thinking about questions, I will share a little anecdote. The senior last year, she graduated, and they created zines to advertise their senior thesis to get people interested into what they had done, and it was really, really, really wonderful. So there's a question for you, Katie. Are there online zines, or is that outside the zine category?
So we have made zines online in the past year during the pandemic. We've done a lot of online workshops. I have a few templates, and so it is possible. A lot of folks post like PDFs and stuff of their zines online, so people are doing it. I think for me, zines are always like a tactile thing, though. So I really want to see like a physical object, but there's there's no rules, right? So you can have them either way.
Thank you for your question. So we are just about out of time. So I would like to open things up for you so you can ask a question of any of our panelists here. You can ask about the content of the talks, but you could also ask, more general questions about the academic experience on campus, if you have any of those at this point. Give you just a moment to think. While you are thinking, I will let our panelists know that we're going to have a final lightning round, a very brief piece of advice for new students. Reese, when do we choose our classes? I am going to ask Sarah in admissions if she knows the answer to that. I think it's going to happen sometime soon.
Yeah, I'll go ahead instead of answering that in the chat, I'll answer that in person. So basically, all of you should have in your My Puget Sound a survey to fill out, which is your advising questionnaire. In that, you will be able to fill out, what classes you're interested in, what SSI classes you're interested in, what advising classes you're interested in, all of that. And then come orientation, you will receive a general schedule that's put together by advising and the registrar's office. And once you receive that, you'll be able to talk to your peer advisor and your academic advisor to just make sure that everything looks according to what you hope for the semester. So I believe that those surveys are on your My Puget Sound and have been for some time. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to let us know in admissions and we can get you set up with the proper information. Hopefully that answers your question, Reese, and anybody else who had a question.
Thank you. All right, our lightning round then. So let's go in the order of our presenters. Professor Brody, quick piece of advice.
Yeah, I would say, especially as you're entering into this exciting new stage of your life, there are multiple paths to the same destination. So don't become too set on just, thinking there's only one way of doing things or one way of getting to your future desired career, whatever it may be. College is all about trying new things and taking different types of classes and joining groups you would have never joined before. So really take advantage of having those opportunities this time in your life and worry about the destination later.
Thank you. Professor Claire.
So I am going to say, take care of your health. You're going to do a lot better at everything you do if you get enough sleep. And I know there's a whole thing about that, but really, truly, get enough sleep. Eat well. There's lots of great food at Puget Sound, and get some exercise and get outdoors every day, even if it means you miss out on something. Better to do, 8 things well than 10 things not so well.
Thank you. And Katie Curtis.
Yeah, so I think my piece of advice for you all is to talk to and get to know staff on campus. I think we often think of building community around professors and our classmates and the things that go on in the classroom, but your college experience is about a lot more than that. And part of what makes our community so engaging and wonderful is the fantastic quantity and quality of staff that we have on campus, whether that's in the library, in student life, in CHAWS. There are people everywhere that are here to support you. And so I really encourage you to make friends, smile, make connections with those people, because it's going to make your campus experience a lot richer.
Thank you. So thank you all for coming this afternoon. And before I wish you a good evening, just a reminder that next week, same day, same time, there will be the third Inside Academic session exploring science and technology. So with that, I'll say good evening, and I once again thank our presenters.
The library is now closed and the doors will